Welcome to a Between Bites Piecemeal episode. Piecemeal is a podcast hosted by the Emily Program, and Between Bites are short episodes addressing topics you want to know more about. Piecemeal covers topics related to eating disorders, body image, and how society may influence our thinking. Please use your discretion and reach out for support as needed. I'm your host, Jillian Lampert, and for Between Bites, you get just me. Welcome. Today's topic is one I'm super fired up about. Today's topic is focusing on talking about bodies or not talking about bodies, especially other people's bodies, especially people like celebrities or other well-known people. Is it ever okay to talk about bodies? Why or why not? What about helping support young people who might feel conflicted by the appearance of a celebrity or someone they adore? How does that conversation go? How do we think about that? So, we're going to dive into this talking about bodies idea. So, generally, let's start at the beginning. Generally, we encourage not talking about other people's bodies. Rarely does talking about other people's bodies in a comparison sort of way help really anybody. But what if a well-known person's appearance is concerning? Or what if somebody we know that's somebody in our life? What if their appearance is concerning? Can we talk about it then? How do we talk about it then? What do we say? How do we talk about it? What's okay? What's not okay? And so I want to think about that. So we generally say, talking about bodies doesn't really lead to really good outcomes most of the time. And we also want to encourage when somebody's concerned about somebody else, and that concern has something to do with their body or their health or how they're being in relationship with another person, well, we want to address that. And we want to address it from a compassion-based perspective that starts with I. And you're in a compassion-based perspective when you're thinking and your words are framed in I. I feel, I see, I think, I wonder. You bring your curiosity and your compassion to that conversation. So that's one of the tips that you can think about to know that you're in that compassion-based framework. So how about if we talk a lot about addressing somebody we might be concerned about who might have an eating disorder or might be struggling with their body image or might be struggling with their eating or might be struggling in some other ways. Those conversations are not exactly what we're talking about today, but I do want to talk about that quickly because that's also really important. And so in those conversations, you're going to start with that compassionate perspective. You're going to start grounded there and say, I'm concerned. Here's why I'm concerned. I'm concerned because I see you. Maybe this is an athlete and they're running track. It might be something like, I know that you love track and you love the sport, and I see you running. It seems like a lot more than your teammates, and it seems like you are running beyond what your coach is recommending. And I'm concerned that you might get injured. I'm concerned that you're not fueling that adequately. Can we talk about that? So you're really offering your concern and you're inviting the person to talk with you about your concern. And that's a fine line, right? You're not talking about them per se, you're talking about your concern about them, but that frame of I'm bringing you this concern, can we talk about that? Can be helpful. And I would encourage people to pursue those conversations when you are worried about somebody or when you are concerned about something not going right or feeling off with somebody or in a relationship with somebody. Please approach it and come from that compassionate perspective. And also, if you are talking to somebody about suspecting perhaps they have an eating disorder, really be ready with some resources. Like, hey, I looked this thing up online and there's this place called the Emily Program that might be able to help. Or there's this great resource called the National Alliance for Eating Disorders that has some great resource information on their website. And they have a great helpline that we could call. Have some resource with you in that conversation. So we'll probably come back to that on another episode, but right now I want to focus on what about when it's a celebrity in the news or it's somebody that's well known whose appearance is being talked about as concerning. What if somebody appears to have lost a significant amount of weight, or somebody appears to be underweight or appears to be very unhealthy? What do we do then? And how do we help our young people to think about that? Because we don't want people going online and talking about a stranger, a celebrity that's a stranger to them, and assuming that we know everything that's going on with that person and judging that person and berating that person or belittling that person. We don't want that. And we also want young people to be able to talk about how they might be feeling. Ask them. And I think that's the basis of it. Ask them if something's happening in the news, as it does frequently and has recently. If something happens in the news and there's buzz about how we should talk about it, or there's criticism about talking about somebody's appearance, or there's concern about somebody's appearance, ask your young person how they feel about the conversation. Like, how are their friends feeling? What are their friends saying? And at the heart of that, I think you want to focus on what kind of comparison might be happening. Is there comparison happening between the teen's body and the celebrity's body? And how does it feel if there are some reservations about that celebrity or that celebrity's health? How does it feel to really like a celebrity or an artist or a well-known person and also have some reservations about something about them? That's okay. We can hold both of those thoughts at the same time. How can we encourage that dialectic way of thinking or thinking about opposite or different sides of a problem? How do we encourage that dialectic way of thinking to help kids know that two disparate thoughts can be true at the same time? You can really like an artist and also be really concerned about that person, even if you don't know them well, at the same time. And that's an okay conversation. It's not okay to go on social media and say a bunch of stuff about them. It is okay to talk about your concerns with people in your life that you trust, and also to encourage people to talk about uh, their concerns, more about their concerns and less about the other person, if that makes sense. And you also want to think about, are there age appropriate ways to discuss these concerns, right? Are there age appropriate ways to talk about disordered eating or body image concerns? We get asked that a lot. Yes, there are age appropriate ways to talk about that. We can bring a focus on how bodies function and what our bodies can do. How does our body move us through life? What does it allow us to do? How do we fuel it to do those things? Talking about that connection between nourishing our bodies adequately and resting them enough and moving them joyfully can help us, and particularly help young people, to develop a sense of comfort in their own skin and confidence in being who they are, so that they're equipped with tools and skills to manage pressures, the pressures they feel maybe from social media or in the hallways at school, those pressures that they feel to look a certain way, to be popular or to be accepted. So those conversations can happen over a wide range of ages that really focus on what the body can do and appreciating that. Related to that, when we're talking about, other people's bodies, how do we address, media coverage, for example, if the media is talking about a celebrity's appearance in ways that are helpful or not helpful, but how do we talk about that without reinforcing comparisons between ourselves and others? And again, we want to lead with curiosity and questions. We can talk with young people about how comparing ourselves to others, particularly media images, rarely supports us feeling better. We rarely kind of win in that comparison between us and somebody else that we see on social media. We can highlight that while we don't want to judge somebody for their appearance or decide we know what they are struggling with, it makes sense that there is a conversation about people's concerns if somebody in the media seems to be having a difficult time, either with their physical health or their emotional health or whatever it is. Sometimes there are images, there are shocking images of a person who's beloved by many, and that can be an opportunity to talk about what's missing from the conversation. If we see images on social media that reinforce the thin ideal or the muscular ideal, how do those images reinforce this concept that maybe we're not okay? And what would you tell a friend who says something about feeling bad about their body because they don't look like their celebrity idol? Sometimes helping young people to frame it in how they would give advice to somebody else can really help them to see how they might be able to give advice to themselves, or maybe hear what you're trying to advise them to do. That conversation might start a commentary on the media coverage of celebrities, but it really can blossom into a helpful conversation about dealing with comparison culture itself. And so some helpful tips on how to like actually do that. If you're an adult and you have young people in your life and you're concerned about these ideas of how to talk about social media and bodies and appearance, learn what your young person is following. Learn who they're following. Follow those people as well so you can see the content your teen is getting. Be curious about your young person's social feeds. Be as curious about their social feed as you are about their friends, because those social feeds can be very impactful in the lives of a young person. Who are they following? What are they learning? What do they like? What do they not like? And what brings them joy on their social feeds, and what leads them to feel bad about themselves, if anything. And how can we help young people to curate their feeds so that looking at their phone doesn't make them feel less than and doesn't make them feel bad? And certainly, talk to young people about how comparing ourselves to others, particularly again to media images, rarely supports us feeling better. Ask them if they ever find themselves comparing their body to media images, and what is that like? And how do they come out in that comparison? Make sure to ask questions, particularly if there's a conversation about a particular celebrity or well-known person. What is this? How is what that celebrity appears to be doing or saying impacted by the people that surround them? When we think about, celebrities or famous people or well-known people, they're not in isolation. There are producers and directors and costumers and makeup artists and all sorts of people highlighting certain aspects of that person. And how is that contributing to supporting a thin ideal or a muscular ideal? What products are they selling? How are they trying to influence our thinking? Like really becoming media savvy, because a lot of times there's a specific message or a specific product that's essentially being sold to us. And how do we think about that and have some critical media literacy around that? And again, ask your young person what they would tell a friend, particularly what they would tell a friend who says something bad about their own body or says something about feeling bad about their body because they don't look like a celebrity. Kids are so wise. Learn from them and help them learn from each other. And as a parent, if you have kids in your own life, try to model healthy body attitudes at home. And that looks like not talking negatively about your body or other people's bodies, particularly in a way that a young person might interpret as their body's not okay. Things like, I have to go on a diet, or do these pants make me look fat, or I'm going to wear my fat clothes today. Those are all comments that a parent might be making about themselves that are not helpful to themselves, but their child can interpret as also being about them. So being really aware of what we're saying to ourselves and asking ourselves, is that helpful to me? Is that kind to me? And what impact might that have on people that hear it? And that leads us to appreciating our bodies for what it can do and teaching kids to appreciate their bodies. Our bodies are amazing, amazing things that help us do so many activities and carry us through the day. And how do we appreciate our body for what it can do, even if we don't love everything about it? When it comes to food, we want to really ditch the clean plate club. If you grew up with a clean plate club of cleaning your plate before something else would happen, we want to teach kids to eat when they're hungry and stop eating when they're satisfied, and talk with them about what hunger and fullness feel like in their bodies, because that can be different for different people. And overeating or cleaning your plate when you're past fullness doesn't really help anybody that doesn't have adequate food, and it doesn't help the person who's overeating in that time just to satisfy a rule that's put out there. So I'll leave you there. I'm going to add one last caveat that if you are thinking about somebody that that might be struggling with their body image or their eating, or you have concern about your own relationship with your body or relationship with food, when you're worried it might be a problem, get professional support. Don't wait until you're sure it's a problem. We know that eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of any mental health diagnosis. So early intervention is key to recovery and health. It isn't a phase. It's not a passing fad. And even if it was a phase or a passing fad, this is dangerous and deserves professional attention. So please, if you are struggling yourself or know somebody who might be, please reach out for help. If you enjoyed today's episode of Piecemeal, please subscribe, rate, or leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Learn more about us at emilyprogram.com or find the Emily Program on social media. Piecemeal is produced by the amazing podcast team at the Emily Program. Until next time, take care. Thanks for listening.